This is our library area, our book collection, magazines and things over there. This little display here is all the different companies we've run across over the years named Desco. Actually, we have we were a military supplier, so we had a cage code number assigned to us, and I looked up all of the Descos in the military database, and there was like 18 different Descos that supplied the U.S. military, and they had to go by cage code to keep us separated. Here's some of our old catalogs, price lists, sort of things in here. Some of our records, book collection, Navy diving manuals and military and government specifications and that sort of thing there. And, this is a kind of our media wall here. Things that were published about us locally from the Journal Sentinel back when they did Men of Honor. Journal Sentinel did an article. We built 4 helmets for Men of Honor. People who know a lot about standard diving helmets will recognize that the helmets that they used in the movie were not actually Mark V's. The bonnets were commercial helmets. They had the bigger side windows and the larger faceplate, so it made it easier to see the actors inside the helmet. On this wall is people, Desco people, Jack Brown, Max Knoll. That was Thomas Fifield. He owned the business from mid-1960s until Christian Kellner's father, Rick, bought the company in 1999. When Rick retired, Christian took over the company. The picture there is Norman Keene. He was one of the principals in the founding of Desco when Jack Brown and Max Knoll began doing their research to develop the equipment to do the record dive. They worked in the back of his business. He helped finance it. The picture there is from the world record dive that Max Knoll made in December of 1937. His world record was at 420 feet. He was actually scheduled only to go to 350 feet, but the equipment was working fine when he got to that depth. So he asked the surface to tell him what the depth was at the bottom. And so the captain of the Coast Guard cutter that they were diving off of, he went and checked the fathometer, and he said 420. So Max told him to put him on the bottom. Dr. End, who was the medical officer on the dives, he had to recalculate the dive table for 420 feet on the fly. So he's sitting on the deck of the Antietam with a slide rule recalculating the stops. And he was not a sailor, and he was seasick the entire time, and he's trying to redo the dive tables as Max is descending to the bottom. The lady in the poster there, that's an article from the Journal Sentinel, that's Bernice McKenzie. She answered an ad for a solderer at Desco in 1942. She wanted to get into the defense industry and do her part for the war effort. She had no idea what a solderer was. Well, they hired her. They turned her over to 2 ladies that were doing the soldering, and those ladies had other jobs lined up, so they were going to leave after a couple of weeks. So they trained Bernice for 2 weeks. Then she was the lead solderer after that, and she trained pretty much every solderer since, except for Jared, which is our current solderer. She had retired and passed away before he started with the company. She worked in every department, and in the 1950s they promoted her to general manager, and which was very rare in industry at the time. For a woman to be running the company day to day. But she became kind of the den mother for divers. They would call her or telegram or mail letters to her from every corner of the world. This area here is our air hat area. We have a display in here. Down in this display case on the bottom are the 4 prototypes for the Desco air hat. Up until the early 1960s, it was most all standard diving equipment with the breastplate and the bonnet, and it was kind of cumbersome equipment to use, you know, in doing construction, maintenance, that sort of thing. And a trend started to come out with smaller, lighter helmets that were easier to put on and maintain. So in 1966, Thomas Fifield, him and his wife went down to Louisiana. Though they were going around meeting, after they bought the company, they were meeting with all of our dealers. We're down in Louisiana, and there was a man down there named Joe Savoy who was building a low-volume diving helmet. And the dealer in Louisiana, he said, well, I'd like Desco to come up with a helmet that I can sell to compete with this helmet. This was in the time when offshore oil drilling in the Gulf of Mexico was taking off. And the Savoy helmet was pretty much the only game in town other than heavy gear. So Mr. Fifield met with Joe Savoy, saw what he was doing. He came back and he started designing this helmet, smaller, easier to use, easier to maintain. And you can see how it progressed through the 4 prototypes. Mr. Fifield actually even built a indoor swimming pool on the back of his house so he could take stuff home and test it and try it at home on his own time. And he developed it. It went on sale in 1968. For about 10 years, it was the primary helmet used in the Gulf of Mexico. At the same time, there were 2 men in California that were developing a competing helmet, but used a Scuba regulator in a demand system where the air hat is free flow. They kind of overtook the market. Their helmets were very popular. They were made of fiberglass. A lot of divers liked the demand system better, so they became the big player in this market. However, free flow helmets have one advantage over a demand helmet, where there's constant pressure inside of the helmet in the suit, which makes it harder for contaminated water to get back into the system and contaminate the diver. So the Desco found its niche in inland waters where you have a lot of contaminants in the water, in sewage treatment plant work, where they're diving in settling tanks and that sort of thing, where repairs have to be made. Also in the nuclear power industry, they transfer the fuel for the nuclear reactors underwater in a tunnel, and all of the tracks and everything and cabling that they use for transferring the fuel rods has to be maintained. So there are constantly divers going into these nuclear power stations, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission only allows them to use the Desco air hat in the nuclear system, and that's become kind of a worldwide standard. So we're virtually the only helmet that they use in nuclear power stations. Matter of fact, the little power plant we've got sitting on the display case there was something we bought at Menards, but it was just kind of the tie-in with the display here. You can see on the wall, there's a couple of patterns for the original prototypes, some diver photos, and then that was a cover of a Popular Mechanics magazine that shows the Desco air hat in nuclear work. The artist rendering of a diver working in a nuclear reactor fuel tunnel. This is our museum. Over here we have a display case. A lot of divers have sent us stuff over the years. You can see there's figurines, G.I. Joes, some odds and ends. Down below we have challenge coins that we've received we get a lot of military divers that are either in the area on vacation or they're stationed at Great Lakes, and they come up and they'll leave us challenge coins. So we've got kind of a small collection of those. Over here is our helmet collection. The company never planned on getting into collecting. It just kind of happened. The Morse company went into bankruptcy in 2015 and we bought out the assets. So not only did we have Desco history after that to preserve, but we also had Morse history, which goes back to 1837. Morse and Schrader were the two big American companies that made diving equipment, and they were doing it since the 1840s, 1850s. We've picked up helmets over the years. This helmet here belonged to a U.S. Navy doctor. The helmet next to it is pretty much our pride and joy. A lady called us and said that her husband had passed away. It's a common story. And she had this helmet and a case from an air pump that she wanted to sell. And she sent us photos and we got pretty excited right away. We recognized it as a Morse helmet because of the breastplate shape. Morse and Schrader on their commercial helmets, they each had their own shape of a collar that the dress would have. And we could recognize it as a Morse helmet. We knew it was very early because before metal spinning got into the diving industry, they would make this shell in two pieces, and you can see up here where the joint is on the tops. So we knew it was mid to late 1800s. And as we dug into the helmet a little deeper, we noticed some things that were unusual based on everything we knew about diving helmets, even going back that far. So in doing all the research on it, what we could find, we believe that this helmet is pre-Civil War. It could actually be one of the first helmets that Andrew Morse made, by virtue of the fact that the way it is made is different than the later ones that came on afterwards. The geometry is a little bit different, which makes it an uncomfortable hat to wear. And just a few details, functionality details that you see in later helmets that this one really wasn't the greatest. So we're still trying to authenticate it, but we do believe that it's very early American diving helmet. These are called Jakes, and the story goes that the reason a full diving outfit on a mannequin is called a Jake was the first U.S. Navy diving instructor's name was Jake Anderson, and he used one in his class when he was teaching Navy divers. So the name kind of stuck. They started calling the mannequin Jake. This mannequin here, he's a U.S. Navy diver, has the Mark V diving helmet on, heavy weight belt, canvas shoes, which is what a Navy diver would have been wearing from the Mark V came out in 1916 and was used until 1984. So there was a lot of them. Okay, this next Jake is a U.S. Navy Mark 12 diving outfit. The Mark V was retired in 1984 and they replaced it with the Mark 12. It was not a popular helmet. It's complicated. It has a lot of parts on it. Morse got the contract to build them. That's why we have one in our collection, because it was a Morse product. The Navy wanted it to be a complete outfit, so down here is a helium backpack so that they could do mixed gas diving with it. The helmet is really heavy. They discontinued that helmet, and in about 1989, the Navy Experimental Diving Unit started looking at replacing the Mark 12. They bought some Super Light 17s from Kirby Morgan, did some testing on it, requested Kirby Morgan to do some changes for the military, and then they adopted the Superlight 17B as the Mark 21. We have a bunch of other products that we had, Desco and Morse. This is all communications equipment. This was not Desco, this one here. This was actually built by another company, but it's World War II. This is what the Navy divers used to use for communications with the standard equipment. Big, heavy, just the way the military likes things built. Down below is a couple of different air compressors that Desco made. That one is interesting in the fact that the engine was also made in Wisconsin. It was made by Tecumseh. And the electric compressor there, that was parts. They bought the compressor heads and the motors, and they built them up. They bought the tanks and assembled them and sold them. On this rack, we've got on the middle shelf is a spear gun. After World War II, well, during World War II, Desco was the largest manufacturer of diving equipment in the world. We built over 4,000 Mark V diving helmets. They were doing rebreathers, air compressors, diving dresses, shoes, knives, all kinds of stuff. And we were selling them to the U.S. Navy, U.S. Army, and allied countries. After the war, there was so much surplus equipment around, the market just kind of faded. So the company changed hands, and the new owners decided they would start moving into sporting goods to maintain the company's profitability. So they went into making spear guns, water skis, aquaplanes. They had a swim mask, swim fins, anything pretty much recreational. We were still making commercial equipment, weight belts. The green weight belt over there was actually a military cartridge belt that they would put lead weights in. The Army would do that. The Navy would do that for their lightweight diving outfits. And then later on, Desco made a belt of similar type that we sold commercially. On the bottom is a couple of more smaller air pumps. The one on the left is an early one, so it would be early 1900s. The one on the right's a little bit newer, about 25 years newer, but they're all pre-World War II. This is more of our helmet collection here. The helmet on the left, during World War II, a Navy officer named Emerson Bowie was in underwater ordnance. They had to go into harbors and clear mines, and when they would capture a harbor, they would have to take out all the enemy mines so that they could use the harbor. Using standard equipment was pretty dicey when you're swimming around a live minefield. So they wanted a smaller helmet that also wanted mixed gas capability for going, so Emerson Bowie came to Desco, asked them to develop a helmet. So they came up with that small helmet that kind of was the precursor to the small low volume helmets that we use today. And then next to that helmet, these two helmets here were built by Robert Kirby of Kirby Morgan before their partnership began with Bev Morgan. The California offshore oil industry needed mixed gas helmets. Bob Kirby bought Desco helmets and converted them to mixed gas according to his own designs. And there were 6 original ones, and two of the original 6 have come to our collection. All 6 of them still do exist and are in collections. The helmet on the end here, that's a mixed gas helmet. In 1939, the submarine USS Squalus was doing a test dive in the Atlantic Ocean, and there was a failure in a main induction, and the submarine sank. And 33 of the crew survived, 26 died. They were in the aft part of the submarine which flooded. They responded. The Navy helium program was still in development. So they grabbed a bunch of their gear and went out to try and save the surviving crew members and also to salvage the submarine. So some of the divers that actually worked on that project won the Medal of Honor, which is a very rare occurrence in peacetime. But the work they were doing was so dangerous that they actually were awarded the Medal of Honor. The Historical Diving Society wanted to commemorate the rescue and the salvage of the submarine, so they commissioned Desco to build 26 Navy helium helmets, one for each one of the souls lost. And so we built 26 helmets, which they sold to their members. And after that run was done, they had a jeweler in California make a commemorative tag out of sterling silver. And the jeweler sent us the prototype tag. So we had parts left over from the production run. So we built a 27th helmet just for the tag. And you'll see that the tag number is 00, and we put 00 on the helmet. And we kind of dedicate that one to the divers. They not only saved the surviving crew members, but they also brought the submarine back, which was refurbished, renamed, and served during World War II. Had a very successful career. These two shelves on this rack on this side are pretty much mixed gas themed. Down on the lower shelf, we have rebreathers, and in 1943, the Office of Strategic Services, which is the forerunner of the CIA, contacted Desco about coming up with a rebreather. They wanted us to come up with some rebreathers that they could use for clandestine operations, because a rebreather does not give off bubbles. They worked with the OSS. They wanted to order 50 of them. Jack Brown and the engineers sat down and they started working on this design right here with the vest. Has an oxygen bottle on the front and a scrubber can on the back. They would recirculate the breathing air. They would have to supplant with a little bit of oxygen occasionally. That's why the tank in the front. Well, just about the time that they got the first ones done, the OSS backed out. But then the Navy stepped in and said, "Oh, we'll take them." And they bought them, and they started buying them in large quantities. In I think it was 44, the Navy was using for their light duty diving outfits, they were using converted gas masks, or the oxygen breathing canisters, escape lungs that they had in firefighting lungs. So they put out an open competition for a new diving mask. There was 4 or 6 different competitors, but Desco won the contract for our triangular mask, which is like this one here. So that was adapted. That new mask was adapted to the rebreather, and the company actually had a whole department that just made rebreathers for the Navy, and they made those through the war. And after the war, they tried to market them commercially for doing light duty harbor work, hull inspections, that sort of thing. Because this was still, Scuba was still a fairly rare item, compressed gas tanks on the back. So rebreathers kind of filled the gap before regular Scuba got really established. This one on the end is actually a scaled down version that they marketed for the recreational, for like spear fishermen and people who want to go out on weekend treasure hunts and that sort of thing. They were pretty popular until right around the 1950s. Lloyd Bridges wrote a book, and in it he discussed the rebreathers and said that in the early 1950s they started seeing a significant rise in oxygen poisoning because the rebreathers were so efficient they were scrubbing all of the CO2 out of your system, and that's bad. So Desco stopped selling rebreathers for the commercial and recreational market, and we pretty much left it to compressed tanks after that. But for a short time, they were pretty popular in the recreational market, and I don't believe that you saw rebreathers in recreational diving or even in commercial diving until they started using computers on them to regulate the amount of CO2 they were scrubbing. I think Draeger might have started that, came out with theirs early on. Over in this corner is our diving mask display. In 1944, the Navy was looking for a new mask to replace their gas masks, and they were cobbled together pieces of equipment for shallow water diving. Well, Desco won the contract, and we started mass producing the mask. The one up over here on top, that's how the Navy would have received the mask from us. It had a breather bag on the back. They thought it would give the diver, it kind of took out some of the pulsations from the air compressor, because you'd get that the pulse down the airline. They thought that the bag would help with that, and also it would give the diver a couple of extra breaths of air if the compressor should fail. They didn't last for very long. I guess the premise did not work out the way they thought it was going to. And then down below, we have different variations of the mask. We actually had three types of Jack Brown masks that we sold. One was the commercial mask, which had a air control valve on the side where the diver could regulate his air. We had a simpler model, which is next to it, which does not have a valve on it. That was generally used with a very small compressor. We actually marketed it as the pool mask, which they use for pool cleaning. And then we had a demand mask that used a demand regulator that Desco designed. We built that mask until about 2000. We didn't sell many of them. It had benefits in the fact that you could use communications with it rather than having a mouthpiece. The downside was that you had to regularly purge the mask, otherwise you'd start getting CO2 buildup. Just because of the volume of the mask itself, you would get some CO2 buildup in it. So there were purge buttons on there, so every couple of minutes you just hit the purge button and clear the mask a little bit. They also, during the war, they came out with a full canvas suit with the mask attached to the hood. They sold the suit two ways. They sold it with a face seal where you could use a regular mask with the straps on it, or they actually glued a mask frame to the thing, and then they had a hinged face plate that they could open up so that the diver could talk before he went into the water, or have a last cigarette before he went in. So the thing with that hinged faceplate is that thing is terribly nose heavy. It wants to pull your head over all the time. It's a heavy piece of equipment. I don't think it was very popular. And in the early 1950s, the company started working on a scuba regulator because they saw the handwriting was on the wall with the rebreathers not being suitable for recreational, and Aqualung was coming in with their regulator and tank setups. So Desco came out, designed this regulator here, the Airmaster. And when it first hit the market, everybody was very excited about it. It was very simple. I think it only had like 2 or 3 moving parts in it. It was very well balanced. The one problem they had was with the manufacturing. The parts inside were stainless steel. They were all precision machined. And if there were any machining marks whatsoever, the regulator had a tendency to hang up. So they pulled it off the market. They started working on the machining. By the time they got all the bugs worked out, you had not only Aqualung into market. You had Healthways, Scuba Pro. I think Desco was just on the horizon. Everybody was getting into the market, and there was just no room for us anymore. So they discontinued it. Since Desco wasn't going to make a splash in the regulator market, they were looking for other ways that they could participate in the industry, recreational. They came up with, they call it the safety eye. And it could be fitted to a regular scuba mask, it could be fitted to the Jack Brown mask. Basically what it was, as you can see, there's a little light bulb fitted in the mask. There's a battery holder here, and there is a micrometer valve that you could set for your reserve pressure. And when your tank got to that reserve pressure, it would turn the light on. And tell you that you were down to reserve. It was a little bit easier than having to keep an eye on your watch. I don't know how many were sold, but it was an innovation that they came up. They kept trying to come up with new things that people might find useful, and the safety eye was one of them. That old suit was in a shed since 1985, and when we got it, you could actually stand it up on its own. It was gotten so stiff. Down below, those are diver's shoes. These you can tell manufacturers' differences. This was a Morse shoe. You can tell by the tight toe. The Descos were a little bit wider, a little more comfortable, because you were bunching up that canvas inside the shoe. And on those tight toes, if you bunched it up, it could really be uncomfortable. These are cuff rings. If you wanted to use gloves on your dress, you would put these rings inside of the sleeve and then use the clamp on the outside. That way you could take them on and off. And then these are cuff expanders. So when you're putting the diver, you could slide a pair of these in there and stretch the cuff so that you could get their hands through more easily. These were underwater lights that they were made by McGill Company, and Desco sold those. We still make the standard helmets, breastplated helmets. We make about 18 different variants of helmet. We make the Desco Air Hat for commercial market. We still make weight belts, we make shoes, we make the diver's knife, the US Navy diver's knife.
Dumbbell down.
Gotcha. Sorry.
Yeah.